Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast, where we talk to people who are building organizations, building teams, and building revenue. And today I have the pleasure of having Matthew Regan with me. I was going to say Reagan, but that is wrong. Welcome to the program, Matthew.
Thank you for having me.
So it's kind of interesting because we had that conversation before we started this conversation. You said, pronunciations are really important to me. And I think I'd heard once somebody famous said, the sweetest sound in the entire world is the sound of your own name. And that's true, right? When you remember the name of your ex-clients or your employees, it goes a long way.
I agree. I also think it speaks to someone's integrity that they care enough to pronounce one's name properly.
What's interesting is sometimes people go, oh, it doesn't matter. You can pronounce it any way you want, which is kind of an interesting thing to say. And it kind of gives you a glimpse into their mindset. You're not sure whether they just don't want to offend or they've just gotten to a place where I'm just happy you're talking to me. So it's kind of a self-esteem issue a little bit.
Could be. It could very well be.
Matthew, you grew up in this industry. Your dad was an agent, and there was probably things that he did that you went, oh my God, I want to do that. So tell me about one of those abilities he had as an agent that you admire.
Yeah, I think seeing him operate probably comes back to that word integrity again, at a high degree of integrity on behalf of his clients, where it's cliche, but the client's needs were put ahead of his. And there was a lesson that was taught. I got to witness it with my own two eyes and then hear him teach it, is you should never do anything for the money. He said, when you put the client's needs above your own, the money will come. And that's always stuck with me. And it's actually never let me down. It's been good advice.
Can you give me an example of seeing your dad do that in real life where it cost him something to do the right thing? Because, everyone talks about it, but when it comes down to it, it's like, do I take the extra $1,000 or do I do the right thing? Do you have an example that comes to mind that your dad did?
Well, maybe not so much that my dad did, because, 17 years later, a lot of that's a blur. But oftentimes when we represent a client and we're in this case maybe transacting in a home, the purchase or sale of a home, oftentimes someone's biggest asset, you wear a lot of responsibility on helping the customer make the right decision. And one of the wars that rages in a consumer's mind is, am I taking the best offer? Are the terms and conditions appropriate for what that customer's unique situation is? And as a representative of them, you've got to be extremely careful that you don't let your selfish reasons bleed into the consumer's decision making. In just to be blunt, the quicker I can get this deal done, the faster I get paid. Well, yeah, but if the seller or the consumer smells that, good luck getting a repeat customer down the road, let alone a referral. So again, you've really got to draw a hard line between your interest versus the customer's.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is I was at a real estate office in Baltimore and I saw this master at his craft, and a client called in and they were really upset about the offer they were getting. And the guy took 15 minutes to talk to her. And then he finally got her to the punchline, which was, take a look at the net price you're going to walk away with that is actually higher than what you expected. And he could have said that in the first 1 minute of the conversation, but he knew he needed to let her vent and slowly explain it to her and then reveal it was much better for the customer than just saying, not saying, hey, dummy, this. But I thought it was masterfully done, because it's not just about the facts. It's about the relationship that you have with your clients. Because you mentioned, happy customers, referrals. So talk to me about how you train your agents to really strengthen that relationship during the transaction between them and their customers because they reflect your brand. How do you articulate that, and how do you ensure that that's happening?
Yeah, that's a powerful question. And there are many business models in every industry. We happen to abide by a business model that hires, recruits, and retains human beings that, by their nature, a lot of what you said comes very naturally. And I was once given some advice that you can train somebody to do a job, but you can't train honesty, integrity. You can't train that. Like you can help somebody and coach somebody, no doubt, but often we are looking for qualities in a human, in a person, that I don't want to say automatically put the customer's needs above their own, but it's built into their nature. And then once you have that pedigree in somebody, you come alongside them and you refine and you show, when you're faced with giving advice, make sure you don't let your interests again bleed into their best interest. And a lot of it is subtleties. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're not handing them a 200-page playbook and say, read this, do this. Oftentimes it's built into who these people are. And that's one of the things I'm very proud of with the companies that I own. And in this case, the real estate company, is we've got the most amazing people.
Stories are an important part of any organization because you can say, this is what we're all about. And that's like, what does that mean? But when you tell a story of an agent actually doing that, you bring it alive. So tell me about one of the stories you're really proud about, one of your agents kind of stepping up and really living up to your expectations.
Oh, yeah. And I could tell 100 of these stories. One that comes to mind is a colleague of mine who started her real estate career with us. And we're similar in age, and we're scary similar in profile, meaning the way we think, the way we conduct business. And I think I probably was 5 or 6 years in the business at the time she joined us. And I remember some of the ups and downs early into her career where it is oftentimes you'll hear it as a cutthroat industry. And it is. And there's a lot of highs and there's a lot of lows. And I remember saying to her, the faster you develop thick skin, the easier this is going to get. It was awkward advice, though, because if you think about the meat and potatoes of that advice is, well, what does it mean to develop thick skin? Does it mean that you should stop caring about the customer? No, you shouldn't. Does it mean that you need to stop taking things as personally when they don't go your way? Perhaps that's a component of it as well. And I think if you draw a parallel to life in general, as we get older, we experience more. Sometimes it's good experiences, sometimes it's bad. And we develop that thick skin. If you fast forward, what are we at? Fast forward 8 or 9 years later to today, I'm so proud of this person. She's married. She's got a great family. She absolutely kills it in the industry. And I think the thing I admire the most about her, with the exception of being a great mom and wife, is she's really seems to have a grasp on the balance of life. This is somebody that could
Nice.
work 25 hours a day, 8 days a week if she wanted to. But she's kind of figured it out, and she's young and she's successful. And I'm so proud of that.
So Matthew, so you mentioned the thick skin. I do a lot of work with nurses as well, and medicine, just like real estate, it's all about, if you can connect with your heart to the person you're dealing with, that it just makes the transaction so much better. In medicine, I think that's where healing actually happens. But when there's lots of tragic events, especially in nursing, people tend to build a thick skin that shields their heart from the connection. And the balance really is how can we keep that heart to heart connection so people feel that warmth, feel that caring, feel that integrity, but still protect ourselves is kind of the balance that we do. So thank you for articulating that in your story. Question I have for you is this. You've had agents that have come into your organization that you can see that they could be phenomenal, and sometimes they can't see it themselves at the level you can. So tell me a story. You don't name names, but somebody that came in and they could not see their potential, and how you got them to actually overcome their limitations and step into that.
Yeah, that's another great question, and I'll start it with a sports story for football fans out there. The long-standing New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick will probably go down when he retires as one of, if not the greatest football coaches of all time. And you'll look at his Hall of Fame resume, and you'll see a lot of wins, you'll see a lot of statistics, and you'll see a lot of Super Bowl championships, but one of the things he's most respected for in the world of sport is he can see things in an athlete, perhaps on another team or in college, that others don't see. And it's often the gift of being able to see this person's potential. And I've never forgotten that. So when I look at resumes and people that come my way, first of all, I always feel very fortunate that people want to even consider aligning themselves with us. But what we're often looking for is, what is this person's potential? And we have a person on our team, and I've never shied away from telling this story and how wrong I was when I interviewed this person. I remember saying to one of my business partners, I'm going, that person's never going to make it in real estate. But this was a good person, good qualities, big heart, very caring. Her nature was kind of like a nurse, like just so empathetic. And the long story short is she just completely, in the most amazing way, proved me wrong. And she's now 2.5 years into her career and just hitting it out of the park. And like, couldn't be more proud that she actually proved me wrong. And then that's that Bill Belichick, where I failed to see this person's potential. And what a great lesson to learn early. To go, just because there's one way to do something doesn't mean that there isn't another way to succeed at the same goal.
So the Matthew I see before me is way better than the Matthew that probably was there 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
I hope so.
So tell me about one of the challenges you had to overcome, because oftentimes, by the way, here's my personal theory. The reason God invented spouses was to let us know when we're like not as awesome as we think we are. So tell me about one of those hurdles you had to overcome. Number one, how did you identify it, that you knew, oh, wait a minute, I've got this barrier? And then how did you overcome it to become the person you are right now?
Yeah, and I like to think God, humans make plans and God laughs, right? So, I'd have to take you back to my early 20s. I'm making great money. I don't like this word, but I'll use it for clarity purposes. I was very successful. I had the car, I had the house, I had the clothes, I had the lifestyle. And that was about an 8-year period in my life. And I found Christianity, or maybe it found me, depends how you look at that. And a light switch went off. Now that is in conjunction with some incredible people that had the guts to basically stand up to this egotistical, know-it-all, late 20-year-old, and basically say, you got to make some changes in your life if you want a life worth having. And it is cliche, and you could read about it in books and how people's lives change. But I would say that surrounding myself with amazing people that, again, had the guts to just look me in the eye and tell me things that I didn't want to hear, But when I went home and looked in the mirror and had that conversation with the person staring back in the mirror, it was the truth, and it was the hard truth, but it couldn't have been. It was the best medicine that I think I could have gotten at the time, and things changed. Life slowed down. Business took off. Like it's a paradox because they don't. That's not the norm. Normally, life gets busier when business gets busier, but it couldn't have been more the opposite. And what an incredible feeling and result that was.
So we're going to go visit that in a moment, but I want to ask you a question first. Do you know who Pepe Le Pew is? One of the cartoon characters.
I do.
So there was this one episode where somebody had told Pepe that he stank really badly. Pew. And he goes to this dictionary and he looks and said, no, this cannot be true. And the reason I bring that up is, so people in your life told you, hey, you've got a problem. Then you went home and you looked in the mirror. I suspect it wasn't an immediate, oh my God, they're right. There was this struggle of, this can't be right. So take me back there if you could, because I think that's where a lot of people end up not getting the breakthrough they need. They talk themselves into rationalizing what they're doing and still remaining stuck. So did you have that struggle? And if you did, what was that like? And how did you finally get to the other side and go, okay, I got an issue. I need to solve it?
Yeah, that was probably it's a two-pronged answer. So that from the time I had those people that cared enough to look me in the eye and tell me straight, until the time I actually really began to see a material change in my life, was about 3 years now, of struggle, of tug of war. But if I'm being, completely transparent, that is an ongoing thing. I mean, I don't know if I'm any different than another human being, but that tug of war is real. And I would say, if I took you back to those 3 years, that at that point in my life, it would have been late 20s to early 30s. I'm single again. I got the house, I got the cars, I vacation. I got a pretty sweet life from an outsider's perspective. So if you looked at my Facebook profile and Instagram, you go like, whoa, I want that guy's life. But when you go to bed at night, very, very empty, very empty. Couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast that day. Didn't have a consistent woman in my life to share in these experiences. So the tug of war was really like, well, what does society say I should have, and what does society say my life should look like, versus no, like, what's it saying inside, like heart, mind, and soul? What are those three things telling me? And they were telling me very different things. So you want to talk about a tug of war for those 3 years, man, that was tough. But I think I've won. I think I'm on one side of this coin now. And don't get me wrong, it's work every single day. There is still a lot of room for improvement, or as Bill Belichick would say, that guy's got growth ahead of him. We'll hire him.
So you mentioned you found Christianity. So I'll tell you a Christian story before we kind of part company today. Is often I tell people that you and I are like a bunch of idiots here in Brampton, more or less. And if Jesus was on a journey and he's all the way to San Francisco and he's like the being of light, even at his last days at the Garden of Gethsemane, if I'm pronouncing it right, he's got doubts. Should I stay? Should I go now? What's going on? So if the one has doubts, we got a lot of learning to go. There's just plateau after plateau after plateau. Like, it's never done. It's an ongoing process of becoming better as we go. So Matthew, I've got two last questions for you. Number one, could you share a mind hack, uh, a simple technique you use to make your life happier, more effective, that our listeners would really appreciate?
Yeah, that's an easy one for me, and I can't tell you how I developed this, but it would have happened 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember sharing it for the first time, and it was so uncomfortable. I was leading a men's night. There was about 30 of us, and we were talking about what it's like to be a man. And I was leading this thing, and talk about uncomfortable. Like us men, we're not good at sharing emotions and feelings and stuff. But I said I developed what I call a trigger. And this trigger is in my mind, and it's a four-letter word. And maybe you've heard of this word before. It's
Oh my
called
God!
stop.
Don't say that. It's a PG show. Stop. Yes, please tell me.
That it's a four-letter word, and it's stop. And I'll let that sink in for a second. So it's a trigger. It's in my mind. It's a four-letter word. It's called stop, and the visual is red and white, and it's a stop sign. And that trigger will come out, thank goodness, at the most opportune times where my mind is straying in a negative way, or I'm beginning to have an ill thought. It could be any number of usually what would fall into a bucket of negativity. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't work every time, but it's amazing how you can train your brain to get ahead of certain things. Those things usually are the ones that would perhaps drag you down. So I hope that answers your question.
It does,
If there's
actually.
people listening and going, that guy's a little crazy, yeah, I'm not shy to say that, but I will say practice it a little bit and watch what happens to your mindset.
So I'm going to dig deep here just for a little bit. Can you think of a particular moment where that stop sign came up for you, like recently in the last month or two?
Um, it comes up a lot. I struggle with anger and frustration. When things don't go my way, I begin to boil internally. Um, it's a constant work in progress. And if I'm aware of this, if I'm in tune, if I'm not say under the influence, I'm not saying that I'm under the influence a lot, but for those that may struggle with an addiction or certain other things that cloud the mind, having a clear mind often allows you to see what's coming or feel or be aware. So that happens a lot. But I'll share something from a men's group that I learned, and it's a little, uncomfortable maybe for some men out there, or I shouldn't stereotype or generalize, but I remember this man saying to me, who I have a lot of respect for, and he would have been in his mid to late 60s. He's lived a life, he's married, he's raised kids, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, it's so easy in Toronto in July to be driving in the GTA, and there's a beautiful woman out of the corner of your eye dressed provocatively. Well, as a man, you might have that wandering eye, and it may be innocent, but what if your kid's sitting beside you and sees you doing this? And I've never really forgotten that because it's such an innocent thing. It doesn't say anything. You're not necessarily acting, like there's not an action there, but I've never forgotten that. And that's where that ties back to that trigger of stop, because sometimes it's not what you say, it's what you do that can have lasting impressions in a positive way, but maybe in this example in a negative way, depending on who's with you, or even if no one's with you. It'll come back to bite you if you're not careful. So again, training the mind, finding the trigger, being disciplined enough to stay on track, stay on course.
Brilliant. One last thing. What is a book you'd recommend that our viewers and listeners read?
Yeah, so you're not going to be surprised for me to recommend this. I would say the Bible, and I said this to somebody, an atheist last week. I said, look, from an atheist that I was listening to on another podcast, University of Toronto professor, very recognized, credentials are massive, and he goes, basically, he goes, every single answer to life is in the Bible. So I'm only saying the Bible not to like try and have that atheist listening to this go, oh man, this guy's trying to convert me and join a cult. Like, no, no, no. Like, I'm being dead serious. If you just want the most basic answers to life's biggest questions, you'll probably find a lot of the answers in that book, from business to relationship to hardship to the best of times. It answers a lot of really difficult questions.
And even if, from that person's point of view, it's the wrong answer, it still gives you the ability to think about it differently, which is incredibly useful to get a different perspective. But I agree, there's lots of amazing answers in there. Uh, Matthew, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was, you were transparent and vulnerable, and that makes for great radio. Thanks so much for being on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, Umar. Hopefully, I'll get to meet you in person one of these days.